Hi, and welcome to the Corporate Jet Investor podcast. This week, we're honoured to have Jay Messenger from Messenger Jet Sales. He's been on holiday for the last 3 weeks and in preparation for this, and he's raring to go. How are you, Jay?
I'm great. You're right. I had to take a 3-week cruise and just get myself pumped up for this podcast.
It's good.
But I'm pumped up.
You're pumped up. There's nothing to stop us.
Right.
It feels like a funny market. It's we're talking in mid-March 2025. How can you tell which way the market's turning?
I am much better at telling which way the market's going when the market's already gone, and just then speaking about the market that we're in as opposed to prognosticating about it. In fact, I think in Miami, on the panel there, we talked about that, and the critical dates that I said on that panel were going to be January 20th. We'd already had the election, so we knew who won. It was going to be January 20th, which was going to be the inauguration day, and then we'd see what happened on January 21st, and then it was going to be May 1st, which is the 100th day. And I probably didn't anticipate how many things would have occurred in between. But it creates a very interesting environment that I don't know how to say which way it's going. I still see a lot of enthusiasm. I still see it taking longer to get transactions closed. I still see more inventory coming to market. I see prices being lowered, not drastically, but lowered. And I see more days on the market for the inventory that's come. So I see a market that is responding to uncertainty, and uncertainty creates stock market changes, of course. It creates anticipation and anxiety. But I don't see a market that's falling apart. I still see supply chain issues, and I don't know how to call it yet.
When did you first start selling aircraft?
1974. This is my 51st year.
Sorry, I didn't know that. But during that time, you've seen lots of different downturns.
Yes.
Are there any lessons you pick up from trying to spot when the market's turning?
Funny you should say that, Al. I always tell Josh when he says, "Oh my God, things are slowing down," or "I'm nervous about this," or "nervous about that," and I say, just keep doing what we do every day the way we do it, and everything will be all right. So did I learn any lessons? I think the lesson is continuity. The lesson is maintaining transparency and maintaining ethical processes, and you'll get through anything. Sometimes you just see more sellers than you do buyers, and sometimes you see more buyers than you do sellers. It's which way the wind is blowing.
And when you see a market turning, when there's suddenly 100 aircraft of a similar type to the one you're selling, where before there were 5, how do you make your aircraft stand out?
Great question. And it's really interesting because it doesn't matter whether there are 5 or whether there are 100. There are usually fewer than 5 and far fewer than 100 of those that are on the market that would work. By the time you go through the available inventory, regardless of how small or large the pool is, and you start to segregate it by pedigree, by operational history, by the integrity of the operation, where it's been operated, who's owned it, you get to a much smaller number. So how do I get there first? I look for the benefits of what I have to sell and promote the benefits. And I'm also, probably the older I get and the longer I've done this, less interested in just saying yes to everybody that wants me to sell their airplane, but trying to do that homework before I even accept a listing, to know that once I have it, I can sell it. I always say, I've got a brown lace-up size 10 shoe to sell, not a black slip-on size 11. So I have to sell what I have, and I can't make it into something different. So I'm always careful to try to categorize it and look at it carefully before we even say yes to put it on the market.
And can you find something special about every aircraft?
Well, good or bad, I can. Yeah, I can find some special bad things, and I can usually find some special good things. But it's got to have balance. And as far as I'm concerned, the good has to outweigh the bad, because you can't brush the bad under the rug. So of course you can. Of course you could say it's got a nice paint job, but it's full of corrosion. Well, you know, you can that doesn't overcome the corrosion just because of a nice paint job.
And how important is the psychology of the seller?
It's everything. I think the psychology of the sale is everything. I think everybody is looking to feel good about a transaction, seller or buyer, and that's the psychology. And so I think when it's over with, you've got to give the buyer some bragging rights to talk about their new acquisition, and you've got to give the seller some bragging rights to have said that that's the kind of aircraft they delivered to a transaction, and they did well when they sold it. Nobody walks away or should walk away with a complete win with the other side having a complete loss.
And as a broker, do you mind whether a market's going? You don't necessarily care whether a market's going up or down or flat, do you?
Well, I'll tell you, it's no fun. It was no fun being a broker in 2008 because everybody was uncertain. Some people were getting really hurt in terms of the value of their airplane, and finding a buyer was much harder. So, you know, as a broker, I don't own the equipment and I don't suffer a loss when the value goes down. On the other hand, as a broker, if we're in a market that is dramatically slower, not only does it have more days on the market for the airplane, but it's more days it takes me to represent it before I can get to a sale. So it does matter to me, and balanced markets are much more fun to be in. But you got to take the market that comes along. I don't get to make the market. I have to deal in it. So to your point, I try to find markets that are, I try to find sellers in down markets that are realistic. I try to find buyers in up markets that are realistic, and then create a transaction.
Let's go back to the global financial crisis. How early on did you realize that the market was about to turn?
Almost one day to the next, Al. I mean, literally one day to the next. I had people that had made an offer to purchase an aircraft one day, and 2 days later they came back working to get out of it, as did the OEMs. We didn't have an advance notice, and nobody had been through anything. Even the .com bubble burst in like 2001 or whatever the year was. I don't think that anybody expected or anticipated a global crisis like we stepped into in 07, 08.
And also, presumably, you didn't anticipate it lasting so long, the sort of,
right,
the lost decade.
It was every bit of that. And then there were some unspoken downturns in 2013 and 2014 when the price of oil went from $150 a barrel to $50 a barrel, and the value of our dollar went up so significantly, and oil changed so dramatically. I mean, I think that we started to get going in maybe 2010, getting back some traction. And then by 2013, we had sort of unspoken recessions going on because of some other issues. So, and when you deal in a piece of equipment as specialized and as expensive as a business aircraft, we are subject to every whim of a market, every whim of economic factors. We are hit more quickly. I try to say that we, as a broker, we're probably the last to know when something's going to change, because people are trying to hang on, people are still trying to buy. But we get involved. We're late to get started, and we're quick to come back. As soon as people can afford to come back, they come back.
And that's exactly what happened when the COVID lockdowns ended.
Yeah. Right. In fact, when the COVID lockdown came, we went into high gear trying to decide what this would do to the price of airplanes. And we really looked at it and we're completely wrong. We said, okay, the price of airplanes are going to go down between 5 and 20%, depending on the pedigree, the age, the type of airplane. And you know what? They went up 10% a quarter for 3 or 4 quarters. We were just completely wrong. But what we didn't understand, and nobody understood, was what it was going to do to demand, and how broad reaching, and also how much wealth was going to be created during that period.
Yeah, I think a lot of us felt, I thought we were going to see a big crash because, if people aren't earning money, they can't afford to fly private.
Yeah,
I think the wealth creation surprised everyone.
Yeah, right.
If I'm buying an aircraft, what should I expect it to depreciate by every year? If I'm just doing a rough rule of thumb.
We tell people 5 to 10% a year, and that's a function of its age, its pedigree, its category. Newer ones depreciate less. Older ones start to depreciate more, but I don't think they depreciate more than 10% a year at the worst. And I don't think you can expect it to depreciate less than 5% at the best.
And if it ever goes up, just count yourself lucky.
And when it goes up, count yourself lucky. I remember at I think it was one of the Miami events, on another panel I was on, I think Chris Ellis said, people are still playing with house money right now. There was so much value that was created that you couldn't expect to last, but you took advantage of it while it was there.
So you've been really honest. You're not trying to predict the next year, and I don't blame you. What other trends are you seeing?
Well, the trends I'm seeing are, I'm seeing more inventory, I'm seeing reduction in prices, and I'm seeing more days on the market. Now you can stack those up and create an outcome as a result of those trends, but I'm not seeing yet less demand, but I'm seeing a more prudent buyer come in and not be willing to just throw money at the wall, but really focus on the opportunity that they have today because of choice based on supply.
Departments. There's been a lot of talk about flight departments struggling, and we've seen great growth at managed fleets, and we've seen fractionals rise. Is the death of the flight department over-exaggerated?
I think so. I think to some extent it was potentially prudent planning in some cases, but in most cases, if you've got a company that is still operating and enjoying the value of their business aircraft, getting out ahead of their competition, getting in front of their client, doing that with strangers or making new friends and hoping that they're going to deliver the product that your flight department has been delivering for all those many years is not as prevalent, and I don't think that it's a trend. I see it happening, but I don't see it becoming the norm.
Do you prefer selling to corporates or individuals?
They're different transactions. When I deal with a corporate entity, they have some predetermined ideas on transition and number of years to own the airplane. They're very focused on mission fulfillment and getting the greatest and latest technology to meet the needs and meet them safely and get exactly where they want to go and be very prudent about that. The individual tends to be a little bit more driven by the emotion of the ride and the emotion of the opportunity and the opportunity to share the world with their family because they can. So it's a very different kind of transaction. One's a little bit more premeditated, and the other's a little bit more freewheeling. They're both terrific, and they're both people. So whether it's a corporate person or an individual, you get some nice ones, you get some with good taste, and you get some that are smart, and you get some that are challenging. And I don't think it matters. It's great to be chosen to be a part of either side's transaction.
Would you say that's one of the perks of your job? Is that no two transactions are ever the same?
One of the perks of my job. Say that again, please.
No two transactions are ever the same, are they?
No two transactions are ever the same. And by the way, that even when we do two transactions for the same client, and they say, well, gee, should I get a discount on the second one? They're equally as complicated. And because you have one doesn't make the other any less complicated. So they are very challenging. In fact, in today's world, and we've talked about this on a couple of panels that we've done at CJI, transactions take longer to close, and it doesn't seem to have a pattern or a trend as to why. Every transaction is plagued with this issue or that issue, be it a regulatory, a paperwork, a maintenance issue, a supply chain issue. So no two are the same.
But I guess that when you've been doing it for 50 years, you have tricks that you can, you've seen similar situations.
When you go for a pre-buy, these maintenance facilities, for instance, they know just where to look depending on the kind of airplane. They know whether to look at the windshield frames. They know whether to look at the door lintels. They know whether to look in the fuel tanks. They know because they know right where to go for their highest return on finding something and repairing it. After 50 years, I know how to choose a transaction and look at it and understand and anticipate where a problem may or may not be.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot of talk about one type that had huge landing gear corrosion a few years ago.
Right.
So let's go through your company. Actually, let's go right back to the beginning. Your mum was a story journalist, highly regarded. How did you end up in aircraft sales?
Well, I think what I got from my mother, aside from a high degree of ethics with respect to work ethics, was how to write and how to speak. Because I watched her speak and write. When I was a kid, she had a teletype machine in her bedroom, and all night long you'd hear it go ding 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 ding. And she'd come home at night from being out at a nightclub covering the beat and have to send in her article at midnight or 2 in the morning. But I didn't learn that, and that's not how come I got in the business. I got in the business, strangely enough, because as I was leaving college, I went to my godfather. I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. I wasn't going to be an attorney, and I wasn't going to be a doctor, so there's all this stuff in between. And I said, gee, what do I do? And he said, come to work for me. I'm in the beer business. This was in Houston. And none of my kids are really going to get into this industry. Come on in. And I did. But during high school, I learned how to fly and was a flight instructor in college. So I went to work for him, and one day I was in my little cubby counting money from a day's worth of beer sales. And he came in on a Friday and he said, you know all about airplanes. Let's go I want to buy an airplane. Come with me today. That was a Friday. What he wanted was a Piper Navajo. And so we went to the dealership in Houston. It happened to be going out of business. So rather than buy an airplane, we bought the dealership. And he said, you know all about airplanes. Come run this. And I was 21 years old, so I knew nothing about anything, but how to maybe take off and land a Piper 150, a Cessna 150. But I went there and we took this fledgling, bankrupt Piper dealership and turned it into Piper's #1 dealership in a year. And after a couple of years, he came to me and he said, why don't you either come back to the beer business or I'll give you this dealership. I was so stupid and naive at the time. I should have taken the beer business, but I came back to the airplane business and he gave me the dealership and then grew from there and have been in it. That was 51 years ago.
Okay, and you're very much a family business. So let's talk about your key partner. How did you meet her?
She's my wife. I met her in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We fell in love and moved to Colorado. She was a CPA by trade. Like Lou, for you, thank God I have her, because she's as much where my wealth came from, not because she came with wealth, but she helped me amass it and know how to spend it, know how to earn it. So she gave up public accounting 32 years ago, came into the business, and runs our family office, runs the back side of our business, runs the front side of our business. She doesn't sell, but she does very instrumental in doing valuations on the aircraft, doing budgeting, helping the clients that way. And then Josh joined the business 24 years ago, so he's not a newcomer to it.
And did you always hope that one of your kids would join it?
I didn't think about it. Certainly didn't think about it 51 years ago. So I didn't have kids to think about. But, what a joy, what a treat. It makes a difference. Frankly, Al, it's probably kept me from going out and growing the business with tons of salespeople, just because we have such a family trust for each other, that we know nobody's going to get the other one in trouble. We know we're going to say the right things and we're going to do the right things for the clients. And you start to potentially lose control when you start to add people to be out there and make those commitments. So it's been a joy. Now, we probably need to look at that going forward. And I think we will bring a person or two in to be with Josh. But being a family business has been great. Now, Adam was in the business for 14 years, and he left last year because he wanted to go in commercial real estate. And I wish him well, and we're together. He still lives here. It's probably a closer relationship now with all of us than when we were all together. That works too. We don't have a 200 or 3,000 or 4,000 person business where one sibling can go to one side of the company and the other can go to the other. There's 7 of us, and we're all sitting in the same office. So we're very close in more ways than one.
And Adam's the bright one, because there's no pre-purchase inspection.
Well, they do check for cracked foundations, I think.
Yeah, the surveyor always misses that,
right.
On a residential. And have you never been tempted to grow to 100 salespeople with 50 offices around the world?
Never. And we're tempted all the time to buy airplanes. Lenders come to us and offer us lines of credit. We sleep well at night. We don't think about it. We love our methodology. We love the way we do things. We have great clients who have been with us I've got some clients literally have been with me 45 years. So no, this is really what feels comfortable.
How did you switch from being a dealer to a representative of to pure brokerage?
Well, at some level, Piper did that for me. We had the Piper dealership, and in 85, Piper, like most of the general aviation manufacturers, either stopped building airplanes altogether or reduced dramatically the number they built and distributed them directly because of product liability that lasted forever. So a kid could go into a barn, find under a stack of hay an old Piper Cub, pull it out, fly it, kill themselves, and 30 years later they could go back and sue Cessna. Actually, Russ Meyer was one of the ones who was the chair of Cessna at the time, one of the ones that really was so proactive to go to Congress and have that law changed and make it an 18-year product liability for aircraft. But that's what happened. Piper stopped building for a while. And at that point, we had already made so many great friends buying and selling their Piper products that they just hired us then to help them broker. In those days, turboprops mostly, and then into jet planes. And that's how that transition evolved.
And that was your customers would start off with a Piper, flying it themselves mainly?
Often, absolutely. Yeah.
And as their business grew or their wealth grew,
Yeah.
they'd move to a King Air or a Baron, and then into a jet.
Yeah, exactly. Some of those clients we just sold an airplane, a new Latitude to a client whose family had been doing business with me starting that way 45 years ago.
What's a typical messenger client like?
Well, they're nice, they have good taste, and they're smart.
I made that too easy for you. But nowadays, it's more common than then to see someone come in and go straight for a G700 or a Falcon or a Global, isn't it?
You know, I had a webinar today, and I had Ken Rickey on as one of my panelists. And one of the things he was saying is that at FlexJet, their average client is now 10 to 15 years younger than they used to be. So, and they're coming in and going for the long range airplanes, not the Phenom 300s. So yeah, it is not uncommon with the tremendous creation of wealth, specifically starting in the pandemic era, that people are coming in and reaching up and not reaching down in terms of category and ability for an airplane. And they're paying a little less attention, for instance, to mission profiles and mission fulfillment, and just getting the bigger plane that can go faster and farther.
Do you miss the days when the buyer was often the Piper, when they were just in love with buying the Piper?
You know, in those days, I sat in the front seat next to the buyer, and that's where the buyer sat. Today, they turn right and go to the back, and that's where I go. And I think they're more sophisticated, at least in their selection process, than they were then. Then it was, well, what could I buy and learn to fly myself? And it started with a Cessna 150 or a Piper Arrow. Today, it's where do I want to go? What's the best way to get there? You know, you're dealing with $2, $3, $4 million a year annual cost to operate these airplanes, not the price of 16 gallons of av fuel to put in the airplane. What does that cost? So it's more sophisticated, it's more challenging, it's more interesting today dealing with that kind of a client.
And when did you start targeting international deals?
Almost right at first, because as we had, you know, we were in Houston, Texas, and Houston was a big oil capital. Texas was. And so there was a lot of early international kind of work that we did and that we learned from.
And then you moved from Texas.
We left, well, once we didn't have to have the Piper dealership with respect to a territory, we moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in '87 and stayed there until '93, and then we moved to Boulder, which is where we've been.
And why Boulder?
You know, Boulder was a great place to raise the kids. New Mexico didn't have as good a preparatory schools to get the kids ready for good colleges. New Mexico is a great place to live, beautiful surroundings, lovely people. But we wanted to get to the same kind of climate. We wanted to get to a small town like we were in Santa Fe. And Boulder just seemed like a natural progression. And it's been a great place to raise the kids and a great place to have the kids raise their kids.
And when you moved there, was it a less competitive aircraft sales market, or was that irrelevant?
It was a different market. You know, in those days, like in '85, I don't know what year AMSTAT started, but AMSTAT started, and the world, everybody was afraid was going to change, because all of a sudden the value that I had was what you didn't have. I knew things you didn't know. So I had something to sell that you didn't know about. Amstat came along and created a multiple listing kind of a service. And then, of course, JetNet that rivaled what the MLS service in the United States is in terms of property and real estate. So we had to learn, number one, to not be afraid of technology and know that it wouldn't put us out of business. Many people thought it was going to put them out of business. And so a small group of dealers wanted to buy Amstat and put it out of business, just like today they want to buy the controller and put it out of business. But it changed us, and we learned that if we would just be smart and understand that there was now going to be a deluge of information and people were going to need us to help them sort through it, and that's where our value would come. And then that created more brokers than dealers. We were actually one of the first groups that did acquisition brokerage, where people would hire us to buy. Most people would think they'd hire a broker to sell. So we created that. It didn't stop us or slow us down, technology. It really gave us a real boost.
And also, you did some amazing marketing efforts. Can we talk about the mobile phones?
Yes. Well, I was going to show it to you, but we're not on camera. But yeah, what we did is we took had a beautiful silk covered box, and in it was a pedestal, and on the pedestal was a cell phone. And on the lid, when you opened it up, it talked about the fact that you only needed to know one person to call, keep this on your desk. And when you needed to make that call, push 1, 2, or 3, 1 for Jay, 2 for Josh, and 3 for Sandra. And we had these phones, we put them into service, we programmed them, and we sent them to 100 people. And then we sat back and waited for the phone to ring. And, it did a little bit. It was more novel. So, in fact, we sent them to several corporations, and we made good friends with the flight departments, but they had to send them back because they weren't allowed to keep products that were sent to them over a certain price. So, it was a pretty unique and fun and exciting piece to do.
Do you think you sold anything off that?
I don't think I sold anything. I told people I sold my sofa, my color TV that day, but I don't think I sold any airplanes.
You also went into video very early.
Yeah. In fact, it's on my website at jetsales.com. You can see it. I don't even know what year we did it, but it was probably early 80s. And we did that. And so then what did we do? We sent out a video, a VCR tape, beta probably in those days, and you put it in. And by the way, you had to mail it, because I don't even think there was FedEx in those days. So there was nothing like, oh, click this link and you'll see it right now. You had to mail it, and then they'd see the airplane, and it was okay. It's fun to look at today. One of the fun lines in it is I say, we have and thanks to our private internal computer system, we track the airplanes.
I also like the fact your accent has changed since then.
Well, if I get around people from Texas, it gets a little thicker, but otherwise.
You have to watch it. It's on jetsales.com, which also shows you how early you embrace technology, because that URL is a pretty good one.
Yeah, we it really did. We understood, Al, was branding. And I'm not sure how I understood it so well, but we've invested in branding from the early days, and we've been consistent with it. We've had continuity. We don't just put out one ad, we put out series of ads. We invest in rerunning them. Today, one of the things that has been so successful for me is sponsoring your CJI webinars. That's great.
We can't turn this into advertisement, because then we have to tell Spotify.
Oh.
What's next in broking?
What's next? What? I'm sorry?
What's going to be the next big trend in brokerage?
Oh, that's great. I'm not sure if I know. I think that it's going to be more of the same. I think the secret to our success, and we're not alone. There are some wonderful people that do what we do that I call friends. It's just the value of transparency, the value of communication. I don't know that we're going to be able to communicate any faster than we do now. I think that whether or not you're going to really have standard forms for contracts or LOIs, IATA, which I'm a proud member of, has tried that and talked about it. And earlier in this podcast, we talked about the fact that every transaction is different. So it's very hard to have one contract that meets all the need of a transaction. So I don't think that's going to really adopt itself and be even as much as real estate. Even real estate is being challenged today on that kind of a standardization of forms. I think it's going to be, it's just, it's a people business, people selling people airplanes. And I don't think that's going to change.
We talked about the psychology of transactions. And you use the word friends a lot. And I know you are friends with lots of brokers. How often does a transaction fall down when you have two brokers who have a huge role in the deal, they're leading it, don't get on?
Well, funny. I think that the transaction, I just talked a minute ago about it being a people business. But when an airplane transaction falls apart, it's most often because of the equipment. It's most often because of a finding during a pre-purchase inspection that can't be remedied or creates a significant finding. It's usually less about the people as a reason for a transaction to come apart.
That's interesting. That could be the big change in the future. Because if manufacturers are monitoring an aircraft, if it's got sensors on it, if when you're doing a pre-buy, maybe you just have AI go and look at the digital records and go, this engine looks great. That could be the thing that simplifies transactions.
Maybe that will take the place of when we send our technical director to an airplane to spend 3 days doing a site visit. Maybe, although, people are less interested, I think, Al, in reading a 10-page AI report as they are in getting the opportunity to talk to someone that really spent 3 days with the airplane, going all through it and keeping the emotion of the transaction high. We'll see.
I think that's a great point because AI won't tell you if the aircraft smells.
Right.
And we talked about a family business. You're clearly doing something really brilliantly. You've had Josh has been there so long. You and Sandra have been together for so long. What's the secret of making a family business work when you've got people from outside the family? I know many of them have been with you for decades as well.
Right. Yeah, Ruth's been with us. She reminded me this morning, 24 years. What's the secret? God, I think it's the same secret we have in keeping our clients. Being transparent, being open, know that every day is not a holiday. Some days are difficult. Some things you need to say are not easy, but you got to say them. And just being honest. And I think making it a place, it's not only a place that your customers want to come, it's a place that your family wants to come. And working on that. And it doesn't happen by accident. And if you think it does, that's when the wheels are going to come off.
You did an NBAA podcast today. Town Hall, whatever I can't remember what News Hour. You did an NBAA News Hour today. And on it you had some fantastic people who've led the industry for many years, many of whom are now running associations. Who do you really look up to? Who are the people you think have really shaped the industry in the last 50 years?
Oh, that's a great question. And some of them are people at very low levels in our industry, but that get up every day and go to work and create meaningful differences. And some are, we had Ken Rickey, Jack Pelton, Pete Bunce, and Ed Bolin today. And what I've said, both on the town halls and on the news hour, is I am so flattered whenever I call somebody and ask them to join the panel. Nobody ever says no. And that means so much to me. But the people that I had today, and we were starting a series, and we'll carry the series over to CJI's webinars, are leaders in the industry, people that have made a difference. And we spoke less today, honestly, about tariffs and things like that than we did about going way back to the beginning of each of these people's careers and talking to them about the differences they made early on and the differences that still exist today as a result of what they did 30 years ago and 40 years ago. We had a lot of fun today. It was a really great event.
I think it's also always worth remembering that everyone has faced tough times. Yeah, I remember during COVID, I had a long call with Brian Moss. He was at Bombardier and Gulfstream, and he'll tell you about selling whitetails.
Right. Brian was going to be on today and couldn't. And everybody faced difficult. If they didn't, they haven't been in it long. And if they say they haven't, they're probably not being honest.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to work in business aviation?
Come on in. I remember Mike and Don Dwyer came to me once when they were thinking about starting Guardian. They were both working for OEMs. And they said, "What do you think?" I said, "Come on in. There's plenty of room. Anytime we can increase the number of people in our industry at whatever position they're in, with people that want to come in and extend the value of our industry." And, I don't mean to sound hokey and corny, but it's true. If you go back to the fact that it's a people business, we need good people to come in. People are going to retire, so we've got to fill those shoes. People are going to move on. We've got to fill those shoes. But we want to fill those shoes with people who have an interest in being client-centric and not just how much money they can put in their pockets. And most of those people that you and I see in this industry for a long time are client-centric, caring industry proponents.
Were you ever tempted to go and work for an OEM?
No, I've never worked for anybody else in my life. I don't know what that would be like. I don't think so.
How many times in the last 51 years have you not been able to sleep because of a transaction?
If that were the norm, I wouldn't do it. So it's not the norm. But it happens. It happens because I'm concerned that I didn't explain something as thoroughly as I should have, or something turned that I hadn't prepared somebody for. And we can't always prepare everybody for everything because we don't have crystal balls. But there have been occasions where I have not had the night's sleep that I wished I had because something was not working right in the transaction that maybe I could have done something different about.
You talk about older people leaving the industry. You've got no interest in leaving, have you?
Now, it depends who you ask. Josh asks me all the time. But
every day.
Yeah, most days. Sandra and I really love what we do. In fact, we are just now, with Josh's help, of course, coming in and getting one of our early ad agencies to come back and work with us and really bolster some more of our branding, update our look. So we're investing in the company. Now that'll happen. The value of that investment will go on with me or without me. But I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy writing. I enjoy meeting people and being in front of people. So I'm here for a while.
What advice would you give to anyone buying their first aircraft?
Oh, eyes wide open. Be sure you find somebody that has done what you want to accomplish before, and that you're not the first one that they're doing it for. Look carefully at the mission that you want to fulfill. Look carefully at what you expect to pay, because the most important thing for anybody buying is to not buy and have surprises. So how do you mitigate the surprise? You mitigate the surprise with exceptional talent around you. You mitigate the surprise by having the resources around you, by being able to afford what you're going to buy so that it doesn't become a burden the moment you buy it. Just be smart about it, as you would buy anything that you've been smart about buying, not just an airplane.
Do you warn them that the transaction itself might not be that much fun?
Absolutely. And that's why they should hire someone like us, because they need somebody there to deal with the day-to-day issues that come up. And there are 100 of them that come up in every transaction. So they're not always going to be fun. They should most always be successful, because you should enter it properly with the right kind of support. So I don't tell them that the transactions, I'm going to get them through something 3/4 of the way and it's going to fall apart. And when that one falls apart, we'll try it again and maybe get that one halfway through. There's too much expense and too much challenge to get a transaction to complete. So you want to do it right to start with.
And do you ever genuinely regret not going into brewing?
Not going into what?
Brewing. Do you ever regret not staying in the beer business?
Not anymore. Not anymore. I'm too close to the end of the airplane business to start over in the beer business. But that was what did I know? Hell, I was 21. I didn't realize, I think the sizzle and the emotion of being in the airplane business blinded me to the sheer ability of what you could earn in the beer business. And it was too late. By that time, I was already successful in the airplane business.
That's amazing. 21 years old, 51 years later, still going. Jay, thanks so much for joining us.
I love this. Al, thank you as always. You're such a great industry leader, and it's fun to align myself with CJI.
I'm nowhere near an industry leader like you are. We're cutting that bit.